My name is Mark Riley. I'm Principal PM, Microsoft IT. I've been in IT forever. I gotta stop walking around, sorry about that. Been in IT forever. Haven't worked for Microsoft forever. I'm potentially the least tenured person speaking at TechEd. I started in August. My first day as I walked in, my boss handed me my laptop and said, "Come on, we're going to go to a meeting about providing phones for all employees in Microsoft." Well, that's an interesting way to start your day. So that's what I'm going to talk about, what I've done for the last 8 months, and what a lot of other people at Microsoft have done for the last 8 months. Bringing Windows Phone out at Microsoft. I do want to start out by pointing out that we are going to give away a phone at the end of this session. It's an unlocked phone that you go pick up at Expansys. There'll be a question based on something that we talk about during the presentation, and whoever provides the best answer for that first will get the voucher and take home a new phone. So what should you leave here with? What I want to provide you with is what we went through, what we thought about, what we did at Microsoft preparing for and rolling out Windows Phone 7. What I'm going to start with is kind of an overview of Microsoft, our infrastructure, how we do things, talk a little bit about industry trends, CL versus IL, talk about decisions we make along that way, consumerization of IT, what a big driver that is, and the phone's a big piece of that. And then talk about mobile services. That's what I provide at Microsoft. And I want to talk about the mobile services we provide and how we set those services and benefit our users. So as I said, started just recently. So you can see 3 million email messages per day internally. I think most of those actually come to my inbox. I told my wife after working there, well, I'm from Seattle, so my wife worked for Microsoft for a while. And I said, I'm getting like 150, 200 mails a day. And she said, yeah, you got to put your aliases off on a rule or something, right? I said, no, they are. In IT, we do get 150 emails a day, so not the 3 million. We currently support about 75,000 devices syncing daily worldwide. And this is all kinds of different devices, right? Microsoft truly is a multi-platform company. I had a vendor come in that I'd worked with previously. I worked at a company called Enterprise Mobile, and I had vendors that I worked with, and one of them came in and showed a slide deck that I'd seen before working with them outside of Microsoft, and they had pictures of all different phones on their slides. They had iPhones, and they had BlackBerries, and they had Windows phones. And when they brought it into Microsoft, they had all pictures of Dash, the old Dash phones everywhere on it. And I said, well, there's two things you have to do. One, realize we're multi-platform. And two, update the phone pictures, because we have different phones. But we are truly multi-platform. Of those 75,000 today, we currently have about 57,000 Windows phones syncing. We have, of the full-time employees that we have who are eligible for this phone program that we created, which I'll talk more about 81,000 Microsoft employees are eligible for that program. We currently have about 57,000 that have taken the program. Not all of those show up as syncing. Some people choose not to sync. Not many, though. Most of those are Windows phones. We'll take a little deeper look at that. Bunch of sites worldwide. The way we capture all this information is one of the people in our group goes out and queries all of the Exchange ActiveSync CAS servers in the regions and collects information about devices that are syncing by region, by type of device, and reports that out every week. So that's how we have these numbers. They're pretty accurate. We've watched them change over time. We have added a fair number of devices recently. So my mobile service, what do we provide? I work in IT, of course. I work in a group called Client Hardware in Client Service Management. And we manage all client hardware worldwide. So Microsoft has PC standards that we manage. We work with the vendors to fulfill those standards. We keep labs of 3 years of device standards, 3 years running back to make sure all of our images run on all of the current machines that we keep for 3 years. That's the lifetime. Part of the people in our group provide those images for those machines. We define device standards, so we make recommendations for hardware, enterprise feature support. We help the Windows team work with what kind of broadband cards are going to go inside laptops, what devices we're going to provide for people for all kinds of service, whether it's broadband, mobile service, phone service, embedded broadband in the laptops, all of those. I also work with a group called Information Security and Risk Management, or InfoSec is how we call it in shorthand. And we work with them to develop mobile device security. So what the policies are, not only the policies on the Exchange servers, but also policies that we work with, softer policies that we work with employees. So the employees know what to do when things happen, right? So you lose a phone, you make sure you change your password. You wipe the phone, but you also change your password, so even if it is compromised. So policies around that, what to do and how to get a phone. Data loss prevention. I'll talk a bit more about how we manage some data protection as well. Also managed by our group are support technicians. We have 5 locations worldwide for Tier 1. Tier 2 is Redmond-based, no desk-side support, just phone support. But we've added recently something we found quite interesting, these TechLink. And they're actual locations that employees can visit and troubleshoot their problems, whether it's a laptop or a phone or whatever it might be. They can bring it there. It's a little easier for employees because they don't have to schedule somebody coming to their desk to work on support issues. And it just makes things easier. We have a large commons area, kind of a mall area in Seattle, in Redmond. And there's one of those there. We have one in our Japan location, a couple other offices scattered throughout Redmond. We support those. Our team, particularly in mobility, are Tier 3. So when they can't resolve issues, then they come back to us. And we then work with whoever it is, the application provider, the Exchange team, the mobile operator, whoever it might happen to be, to resolve that. We'll take a bit more look at the support structure and things that have happened through that. So I want to talk about trends. The biggest trend, I think, for all of us is consumerization of IT. One of the big drivers is driving the price point down, right? Getting more flexible devices, whether they're netbooks or smaller laptops, tablets, slates, iPads, whatever it might happen to be. A lot of this is driven by user satisfaction. So we know, particularly when you're talking about, this is a term I learned just the other week, extended day worker. It turns out I'm an extended day worker. And if you sent mail after dinner last night, so are you. If you work with a lot of extended day workers, it really helps to have devices, whatever those devices are, be they their laptops, phones, tablets, slates, that they enjoy, that they're comfortable with, that make sense to them, that fit the way they work. And that's hard to do when you're building standards and maintaining those standards for 3 years. And so this consumerization drive is pushing us to have more flexibility in what we provide to our customers, our Microsoft employees, our customers. Because if we don't do this, they simply go outside IT and they get their devices and they run them anyway. We have a relatively open policy. We have an extremely open policy on Exchange ActiveSync. We may be making changes in that. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But for now, we are fairly open. You can connect most devices to the system. We count on our employees being smart, doing the right thing, and taking care of their devices. A lot of this comes down to sexy versus secure, right? We encrypt all our laptops, right? Which requires that we have a TPM chip in the laptops. Now, if you go out and buy a consumer device, you probably don't have a TPM chip in that. And in fact, that's something we work with as we're looking at new devices, new laptops, to make sure that we do get a TPM chip in it. It's not a terribly expensive thing for the manufacturers to do, but the margins are fairly slim on laptops, so it takes a bit of encouragement. Fortunately, we're large enough, we buy enough machines that we can help convince them that that's the right thing to do. And it helps us purchase those. So that's another part of our team, is people who work with these vendors to do this. With the consumer devices, we have considerations around all of these issues here, right? I talked about Exchange Active Sync. We want to make sure that that's on the devices, because that's the first use of some device, right? Exchange, PIM, data, certainly what I use it for first. I've been known to play a game on my phone, but the first thing I look at when I unlock the screen is always mail. That's my driver. Device management, that becomes an issue, not only in can I put device management on it, but what do I do with that device management? How do I deal with the fact that if I wipe a user's phone, I'm wiping their data and our data, right? And there's a conflict there. Part of that is solved because we don't normally wipe a user's phone. The user wipes their own phone through OWA, Outlook Web Access. They can reach in and wipe their phone. I can also wipe it through my phone or Windows Phone, live.com. I can wipe the phone there. And then I'm doing it myself, so that's fine. Other devices, well, there may be cases where we wipe it for them, but that's normally when they call in for help. And we'll talk about CL. Some of that enters into CL because some people are concerned about liability around that. We have an implicit agreement with our employees. It's stated in the handbook that if you lose a device, everything's going to be wiped off it. So it's understood. We don't have problems with it. Larger problems seem to come up outside of the U.S. And outside of the U.S., we tend to do more corporate liable. We purchase the phones. We pay for the service. It's more standard outside of the U.S. There are places outside the U.S. where it's not that way as well. We also have concerns around things off-corp storage, is how I put it here. It's badly worded, but how do we deal with exfiltration of data from people's devices to some storage in the cloud that we don't feel is secure? Right? One of the big things my CISO for the phone noticed was the automatic upload to SkyDrive of pictures. And in Microsoft, it's very common to spend a meeting working on a whiteboard and then snap a couple pictures of the whiteboard to be able to translate to notes later. Well, if you're set to automatically upload to SkyDrive, there's no notification when you take those pictures of this whiteboard, and those get uploaded to SkyDrive. Now, you can mark them as being personal and all those things, but as long as you do the right things, it's fine. But you need to be aware of those things. And it's very easy for people who are all in the habit of you see a prompt and you say yes, right? You want to enable automatic updating? Oh, yeah, fine. And then you forget that it happens until you wipe your phone and everything comes back down from SkyDrive. And where did those pictures come from? And they came because they'd been sitting up there. So we've made a point of explaining this to people. We haven't gone as far as posting notes on whiteboards or anything, but we do explain to people that this is a risk and they need to be aware of it. It is a consumer device, after all, Windows Phone. And I spent a good bit of time at the beginning of my tenure at Microsoft, along with everyone else, explaining what things were missing from the phone that I really wanted as an IT professional, as someone who was responsible for the phones and for the service. And I've come to realize that that's nice to do, and it's interesting to do, but it takes a lot of time, and that product cycle's out there a bit. So what I have today is what I need to work with. And that's what I drive to now. That's fine, we'd like to have X, and maybe it's coming in the next version, maybe it's not, but how do we solve that problem today? Right? How do we deal with all of these issues? Well, when we talk about consumerization of IT, one of the things we talk about is explained in this quadrant. I guess it's not a magic quadrant, but a quadrant. When we talk about consumer apps specifically. So there are probably applications that you block on your network, access to certain sites that you may or may not let users get to. There may be things that you adjust and restrict. So we have block, so we have risk mitigation along the bottom axis and business value on the side axis. We have contain, embrace, allow, and block. And allow are items that we allow. We don't do any work with, but we allow people to use them because we think they're productivity tools, things such as Facebook and even YouTube. We allow. SkyDrive, Windows Live. You almost have to allow things like Facebook and LinkedIn now for at least your HR professionals, right? And recruiters, so they can find out about people out where people are posting their information. Right? In contain, these are the items that we allow people to use, but we make some changes to or we block certain features. One of these is Go to My PC. So we allow users to use Go to My PC from inside the network to connect to their machines at home. But we do block file transfer. Again, our goal is to prevent exfiltration of data. Right? And we can't block it completely. Right? But we do make it more difficult so people don't do things by mistake. Say, oh, I just want to send this file home so I've got it to work on. No. If you want to do that, take it on your secured laptop, take it on the BitLockered machine, and take it home and work on it. We know things still get out there, but a lot of it's just training, right? A lot of it's just having your users do the right thing. You see other things in here in contain. You see the torrent and Napster and those things in the block, and those we just outright block. You just can't get to them. And this is evaluated all the time. Things change. You see we've got up an Embrace. We've added Zune. We've actually added Zune, which is really a consumer application. We've added Zune to our corporate images. So now when you rebuild your machine at Microsoft or when the factory builds a new machine for us at Microsoft, Zune is already installed. So when the user plugs in the phone, it just comes up. They don't have to wait and install it and make sure they have the right version. The phone will automatically update if it needs to, and if it's not on the machine, you will be prompted to install it. But we try to make sure everything's on it, and then those builds can be tested, and we make sure we don't have any conflicts. Early builds of what was called Dorado had some issues with our builds, and we had to wait to put it in there until we got that all straightened out. It's now in our builds. It'll now stay in our builds going forward. As I said, we update these things. So soon, I'm certain we'll be moving Skype from simply allow to embrace. And when we work with them to get some management pieces in to do things such as blocking file transfer and proper management on our network, then we'll move them over to contain. Right? So we work with these providers. We're currently working with Windows Live to get more management pieces in so we can manage the content, manage what's going on, and what people are able to do with that. Did I just go back? I did. There we go. So corporate versus individual libel. Of the 75,000 devices we have connecting over Exchange ActiveSync, roughly 10 to 15% of those are corporate libel. Some of them may be broadband cards running in devices. Most of them are phones. But the majority of Microsoft inside actually the number is probably a little higher than 15% because it is just in the U.S. Outside the U.S., the number is much larger, as I said. Corporate libel's predominant outside the U.S. We have what we call CRGA, Corporate Responsible Group Accountable. This replaced an old program we had, which was CRIL, Corporate Responsible Individual Libel. The problem with CRIL was it was done all through reimbursement. So I paid my bill. I went to Microsoft and I said, here's the bill I paid, reimburse me for X amount. Right? Well, when people changed jobs, left, whatever, those accounts just got abandoned. and nobody let us know they were overdue, and we ended up paying for service that never happened. And so now what we do is we take out that middle step. And we require anybody who wants to run a corporate account to create a purchase order. Our mobile operators then bill directly against that purchase order. The invoice is approved, and Microsoft pays the bill. And I have a couple people on my team who help manage CRGA. As I said, a lot of the CRGA is broadband cards, so we're providing service for people. The MiFis are becoming much bigger now. We've got 4G MiFi devices from some of our partners. This group account, as I said, is managed by us, directly paid by us. There are some issues around IL. Again, we go back to who owns the device, if it's individually liable. As I said, Microsoft bought phones for all its employees. We bought them in an interesting way. We didn't just go out and purchase a phone and drop it on everybody's desk. One, we don't know who the carrier, which carrier each person goes for. Same reason we're having you go to expanses for this phone you're going to win today. One of you is going to win. I'm not Oprah. One of you is going to win. The second part of that was that if we just bought a phone and gave it to everybody, or gave everybody a coupon to go get a phone, or any of those methods, it would be a taxable event for the employee, which means it's no longer a free phone. Now I have to pay taxes just to get the phone. So what we did instead is we leveraged the user's existing account, and we had the user buy the phone, and then we reimbursed the user for that phone as a business expense. This means no taxable event to the employee. I believe it still leaves a taxable event for Microsoft, but it's a very large program, actually. As I said, about 57,000 people have taken advantage of it. That number will grow by a great amount when we get Verizon on board soon. They're one of our larger partners in this space. They're probably our largest partner when it comes to mobile broadband at this point. I'd say even more than probably. So we manage those. We manage these devices, these lines of service. We're trying to move more people to CRGA because, honestly, we get much better pricing. It's probably about a 40% savings over what we'll reimburse normally for someone's phone line. We don't reimburse the whole line. It's limited, and it varies depending on your role and your manager, and they may make decisions that, well, you use it a lot personal, so I'm only going to pay half, and we don't know. It's really not clear to us because that's a group-by-group decision in doing reimbursement. There still is reimbursement, but it's no longer corporate liable. We have now the corporate liable on the group accountable. Corporate responsible, group accountable. I'm so used, of course, I'm Microsoft, so it's an acronym. It's CRGA is the only way I ever talk about it. Spelling it out is more complex. We're trying to move more people to that. I'm trying to work with providers now to find out how we can solve the problem of these family accounts, because I think that's one of the things kind of holding us up here, moving to more CRGA, right? Because if my employer is paying, say, $70 to reimburse my phone line, and I take away that primary line from my family account and move it to a corporate line, well, my cost out of pocket for my family plan actually goes up, right? Not by a lot, but by a little. So what's my incentive to do it? I have all these issues about porting the lines back and forth. I mean, the laws support it all and everything. So that's good, but that's one of my strategic targets, is to figure out a way to work with the operators to do a corporate account that allows us to tie in the family plan. We'll see if it works. It'll be an interesting goal. So our service goals, the basic services that we run for mobile devices are, of course, Exchange ActiveSync. As I said, that's the number one piece. Wi-Fi. We have wireless access inside corporate locations, and we had to make sure we were all set for that, and there are some issues you need to be aware of for Wi-Fi and Windows Phone 7. We also have done a lot of work around line of business applications and planning for line of business applications and putting structure around it. We already have 20 definite line of business applications in the pipeline for short term. We will have more than 50 in the next coming months. And so we had to put some guidance around it. We'll take a look at what some of those things are that we had to plan on. SharePoint, that's my biggest, hottest item right now, is getting access to SharePoint. And this becomes a real data filtration problem. And there's a lot we talk about in that. Oh, I'm sorry, and I skipped the one. Support. I want to talk a little bit about support, because that's another piece of the service that we provide. So Exchange ActiveSync with Windows Phone 7, currently, we do set a PIN. We require a PIN. It's not a long PIN, 4-digit PIN. 5 bad password entries will wipe your device, no matter who enters them. Could be your 3-year-old. And we also have, which I call that feature, entering the PIN badly, local wipe. We also have remote wipe, which you can do from either Exchange ActiveSync, Exchange ActiveSync through OA, or you can do it through Windows Phone. Of course, other device management providers provide similar functionality. And then we also have remote wipe. The local wipe is referred to by InfoSec as brute force protection, which sounds much more secure. I probably should get used to using that term. Microsoft uses a fair amount of IRM mail, and I know I talked about this in the keynote. Right now on Windows Phone 7, there's no support for IRM mail in the mail client. But if you open up OA and change your browser settings to desktop settings, then you can go into OA and read IRM protected mail. And it protects it in the same way. Notice I said IRM protected mail, not IRM secured mail. Right? IRM does not secure mail, particularly in this scenario, either OA or in the next version of the phone. So in our client updates, one of the big things we're doing is adding alphanumeric PIN support, so we can now have complex PIN support, which I'm really thrilled with. Somebody brought me a phone that wasn't working correctly. It actually had, the memory had flipped a bit and gone read-only. Apparently this has happened on some minuscule number of them. And I thought, well, I'll just wipe it and see if that doesn't clear it up. I'll just enter the PIN incorrectly a few times. I managed to unlock the phone because the PIN was so simple. So I'm quite happy to have more complex PINs, because even though you ask people to be smart, you really do have to kind of force them, right? We also have separate PIN and screen timeout lock timers, which I'm really happy about. I got in the habit of hitting the power button on my phone when I was carrying an iPhone for a couple years. Every time I finish, hit the lock button and put it in my pocket. So now, every time I did that, it locked my Windows Phone, and I had to enter my PIN. The iPhone didn't do that, right? So I had to get used, and I look at the phone. It truly is glance and go for me. I look at the phone, I look at one thing, and I turn it off and go to put it in my pocket and say, oh, wait a minute, where's that meeting? And I pull it back out, and now I've got to put the PIN back in. Well, now I'm on Mango. I don't have to do that, and I couldn't be happier. Now when I forget what I've looked at, I pull it back out, I open it up again, and it just pops the screen for me. For 15 minutes, I get this feature where I don't have to enter my PIN. I showed this to the CISO. I said, hey, have you seen the new? He says, oh, wow, we got to change that timeout. A little too long, so be careful what you tell the security guys. We'll see how that goes. It takes a long time, I've found, to change things at Microsoft. IRM mail. And again, you saw the demo for IRM mail. I was going to do it, but I think everybody's seen it. If you go to the Windows Phone booth, they demo it every time they go through their spiel. I'm not going to take the time for it here. What I want to do is let you know about IRM mail and what it really takes. Right? So you need to install a rights management server to support IRM mail. Okay? IRM mail in Mango is supported by server-side decrypt. which means your servers have to have the keys on them to decrypt the mail. There's installation procedures. It's beyond scope here to talk about what all the things are to do for RMS. Essentially, it's a server in your DMZ that we can get to. For rights-managed Office documents, for just IRM mail, you can do it slightly different ways. But the important thing to understand here is because it's server-side decrypt, that message is decrypted before it's sent to the phone. So you cannot think of this as secure mail in Mango. Okay? It is, however, we're working on programs to help educate the users that it's not, that they shouldn't think of it as security. What it really is a reminder to say, don't forward this. Don't reply to all. Don't copy it. Don't print it. Right? Because as soon as you start talking about what IRM mail blocks, everybody starts talking about ways around it. Right? Well, I can take a picture of the screen. Well, I can do this. I can do that. Right. You can. There's ways around it. It's not impenetrable. Most of these things aren't. Right? That's why information security isn't called information security risk avoidance. It's risk management. We all have lots of risks. Right? So I just want to be upfront about this. I'm not knocking it. Couldn't be happier to have IRM mail. It's a great way to be able to send mail and again, remind people, don't share this, right? Don't accidentally share this. Don't accidentally hit reply all to a list of 5,000 people, right? When you know you're doing that kind of announcement that's going to generate a lot of feedback. You want to make sure that people don't send reply alls, right? But the biggest thing coming for me as far as Exchange client updates is the Exchange logo program. This was announced last month. One of the issues we've had with devices is some of the devices don't quite tell the truth to Exchange ActiveSync. Tell them you want to enforce encryption on the device. They say, yep, got encryption, all set to go. We want to make sure that we have a PIN on the device. Yep, I've done that. We're all good to go. I had a tablet, a robot tablet, installed mail on it, and it never asked me for a PIN. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So now we have the Exchange logo program, EAS logo program, which says if the company has this Exchange logo, they have licensed EAS protocol, and they honor what they say. So if the server says, I need a PIN, a complex PIN, then that implementation of EAS has to return a truthful response that, yes, I support that, or no, I only partially support it. And you can track these in Exchange. This tied together with a feature from Exchange 2010 SP1, ABQ, Ad Block Quarantine, allows you to control what devices connect to your servers. One of the questions I used to get a lot when I was working in Enterprise Mobile was how do we try and manage our devices more like RIM? One of the great examples of that is a large computer manufacturer who used BlackBerries. They liked the fact that only one device could be connected to the system at a time, because that meant if the user lost the device, they had to come to you and get a new one. They couldn't just go out and buy a new device, throw a SIM in it, and hook it back up to the system, and you never be aware that this device is floating out there somewhere and it should be wiped, and all of those things. We can do that with Ad Block Quarantine. We can limit the number of devices. I'm limited to 10 devices, which sounds big. It's not. I'm forever going into OA and clearing out my old devices so I can add new ones. The three features of this Ad Block Quarantine, we can leave it open. We can limit the number of devices, and that's add. Users can add devices to it, and it's all fine. Everything works. That's the way we run right now. Block says I can block devices by certain features of the devices. Device type, whether it fully or partially supports my features. We have a setting in Exchange for allow non-provisional devices for things that just don't apply at all. And then I have the feature quarantine, which is a perfect feature for these people who want to run a limited number. And what it does is it takes the device ID that connects to Exchange ActiveSync and sends a mail back to the user that says, your device is connected to ActiveSync, but it's currently in quarantine. And you need to add this device ID to approved device IDs within Exchange. Now, this isn't fully wrapped up in a product, but with a little bit of PowerShell scripting, you could create a mechanism that would permit one phone and only one phone for users without any input. You could pick up this mail, you could process it with WMI, or PowerShell, excuse me, I am old. Process it with PowerShell and insert those in. So we get a lot more control going forward. And the logo program gives me the basis to start saying, well, here's some devices that clearly don't match. And we can start saying people can't connect with those devices. Now, being that it's Microsoft, and being that people always have a very good reason for everything they do, we have an iPhone distribution list. We have aliases for everything. We have an iPhone alias, and the people who are on that are very committed, for the most part, to their iPhones. And I understand that. As I said, these devices become very personal. People become very attached to them. If we were to suddenly say we were blocking iPhones, which I don't expect we will do because they are on the Exchange logo program, we would have a small mutiny on our hands, a much smaller mutiny than we would have had 6 months ago. We've lost a whole lot of iPhones recently. Not lost. Lost is a bad word in this context. We've replaced. So this allows us, the combination of these things allow us to start looking better at what we're doing, especially as we move on beyond mobile phones and get into all of these other connected devices, right? Their slates and their tablets and their phones today. Who knows what they are tomorrow, right? I mean, my phone, my desktop phone, connects to Lync, right? So it shows my calendar. So it's going out and connecting to Exchange Web Services, and it's showing my calendar on my phone. So we have all kinds of devices that are connecting. Certainly, a phone with firmware and no ability to add software is not a big threat. But what is the next phone that we're going to put on the desktop? People are coming out with desktop phones that mate with your cellular phone and use the Lync background to call, right? So all of those features to be concerned about. So we'll get more controls over how we allow devices to connect, what devices we allow to connect, and what they can do once they are connected. Our wireless infrastructure, the big concern there was, would we be able to handle the additional load of the wireless? Because we expected people would put their phones on the wireless network. And the performance is better. We're connecting to Exchange ActiveSync. On our Wi-Fi, we're able to connect to resources inside. Some resources. It's limited. Mostly we do IPsec with inside Microsoft, and so resources are protected by IPsec. Some of them we have exceptions for very good reasons, that don't require IPsec. That means the phones can connect to those resources inside Microsoft. So people do want to connect to the Wi-Fi. We don't support it. I know. I've heard that from Microsoft before. That's not supported, right? We don't support it, but it is provided. People know how to do it. And if we hear about problems with it, we still support the wireless infrastructure. So we still take care of that. And everybody knows how to connect whatever device it is. There's a wiki on one of the sites that tells you how to connect your iPhone to the Wi-Fi. Right? So we had to just make sure that that was right. We track performance and usage. We actually have some issues in one of the development buildings with phones because when people go into a particular meeting room, they're all on Wi-Fi, they've all got their phones, and they overload the nearest AP. So we have to connect another AP in the area, and so we're constantly working on that. My cohort and I were in the building and walked by seeing somebody looking at the ceiling, writing down the numbers of the AP so that he could figure out what was going on with them. And we had a much better way to do that, and we introduced him to it. We do provide instructions, right? And it is useful to provide instructions to the employees for the Wi-Fi, but particularly for the proxy configuration, because it's not evident on the phone. And so if you are connecting to an internal Wi-Fi, the proxy configurations are a little difficult to discover. I should have pulled this out. We actually created this. I'll throw it up here so you can see it. Get the right one here. Laptop 2. As a guide that we gave out to people when they purchased their phones. Now, this is one of the benefits, right, of being Microsoft, is we're able to create these items. We have a marketing and communication group that helps us provide this. All this information was also put together in what we call a WorkSmart guide, which is just a PDF, essentially, of the same information. And what I should do, seeing as how I'm not going to do it with my phone, I suppose we could do it with my phone. Why not? I can just show it to you live. That's probably easier. Not my real pin. Well, it is for now, but the phone will be wiped by the time I leave here. So, I had a Microsoft, again, back before I was working with Microsoft, I had a salesperson come and talk to us about the phone coming, and he had kind of a CAN demo. And in it was some CAN information, and it had the person's spouse on the screen, and his spiel went along, and he talked about how they could get updates for his spouse on Facebook. And I turned to my boss, who was just about my age, and said to her, if I'm getting updates about what my wife is doing from Facebook, something's not right. But I do have to say I love having my wife's picture on the phone. When I pop it open, often makes me smile. But anyway, under Settings, which of course is one of the first things that I pin to my home screen, is Wi-Fi. And I'm connected to a Wi-Fi up here that is secure. I thought I was connected to it. I don't know why I dropped that. Let's see if it's going to connect back up. There we go. And so if you hold that, and this is just a general rule for Windows Phone if you haven't learned it. If you ever think you should be able to do something and you can't, put your finger on the screen and wait. Right? Up pops my menu, Edit. And one of the nice features people have been asking for in Windows Phone is to be able to have IP information when you're connected and MAC address, because people like to secure their Wi-Fi gateways with MAC addresses. It really isn't all that helpful, but sure, if you want to do it, then knock yourself out. Hidden SSIDs. I didn't say that. It's another one. But in here you see there is proxy. I choose proxy on, and I'm able to put in the address of the proxy and also turn on authentication if I want to authenticate to the proxy server if that's required. But it is a little hidden, so it was one of the things we wanted to make sure we made available to employees, so if they had proxies configured, they were able to do it. And so those are the kind of things you need to do, right? Go through and just work out what people are going to use the phone with, what they're going to do with it, and make sure you support all of those scenarios. SharePoint. SharePoint is one of the big features of the phone. Really sets it apart. People have been asking me for years, how do I connect my mobile phone to SharePoint? People tried to create applications on Windows Mobile. They tried to create applications on iPhone. People, of course, use the iPhone in just browser mode to connect to SharePoint, but that's not a great experience. But what we've done with SharePoint, it's strange for me to say we when talking about Microsoft. What Microsoft's done with SharePoint is provide a connection directly from the phone. We'll take a look at the actual connection here in a little bit. But how do you make that connection available to the wider world? User Access Gateway is the UAG, is the method preferred for connecting to SharePoint. One of the reasons being that once you authenticate with UAG, it provides Well, it has support for one-time passwords as well, but it provides the ability to just simply enter a PIN to restore your session. And that PIN has a lifetime, and when that PIN expires, then you're required to re-authenticate with your credentials, and then you go back to PIN-based. UAG then will authenticate out to each of the servers that you're connecting to on your behalf. So the term used to be single sign-on, but for some reason people don't like using single sign-on. So I'm told it's not really single sign-on, but what it does is it provides credential support for SharePoint in the back end. The easy way to connect to SharePoint is use Office 365, because you don't need to set up UAG. You don't get the benefit of the single sign-on or the PIN sign-on, but you do get all the support for SharePoint. And in fact, if you use everything in the cloud, I haven't done this yet, but if you have Office 365 and Lync in the cloud and SharePoint in the cloud, when you configure your Mango phone, it'll go out and configure all of that for you. So when you configure your Outlook client, it'll go out and configure your SharePoint setup as well, and it'll take care of all of that for you in much the same way that automatic configuration of Exchange works. Right? One of the big limitations we have about SharePoint, and I used to think it was a joke, but I've heard it so many times I don't think it's a joke. There are 700,000 SharePoint sites at Microsoft. Even if it's only 500,000, that's still a lot, right? And we're able to create them willy-nilly. I can go out and create SharePoints if I want, all the time. And I'm asked to classify the data going on that SharePoint. Is it low business impact, medium business impact, high business impact? Of course, one level above that, PII, right? And our policies currently at Microsoft say no data on the phone other than LBI data, right? We all know why that is, right? It's a consumer device. And this is one of the things we're trying to do across all the consumer devices, is still provide support for those consumer devices, but work on a degraded set of features as you move down the stack in abilities. Oh, no TPM, no BitLocker? Okay, you only get this functionality, right? You're only connecting using one-factor auth? Okay, then you only get this functionality, right? So we're working on how we're going to implement all of those things. Mostly what we do now is say, oh, you don't have two-factor auth? Go away, right? We don't provide any functionality for that. We don't have access from outside into SharePoint yet. I'll go ahead and admit that to you. We're still working on how we're going to do it best, because we have this vast number of SharePoint sites. I'm working on trying to get 5 LBI sites up and running so that people can actually connect to them and use them when they're out in the world. And that'll get us started. We're working on programmatic DLP, data loss protection, so we can go classify data and rights manage that data automatically when we notice through trolling through the data that it is actually high business impact or medium business impact or has data that we want to protect. We'll go ahead and do rights management on that, right? And then we have less concern about it getting out, right? People do the right thing. We can authenticate people. Rights managed documents truly are secure, right? They're encrypted until they get down to the phone. The Office team built the decryption inside. Well, the encryption was sitting inside the phone. The Office team used that functionality. And so when you open a rights-managed Office document, it's truly decrypted on your phone, real time. When you close it, it's encrypted back up. Right? So data classification is very important to us. And we have a large effort going on now to make sure that we're correct on that. And one of the things holding up SharePoint is we have to identify the most important sites to people that we can publish and make sure that that data is correct and make sure it stays correct. Right? The other part for SharePoint access is programmatic access. We have a number of people who want to create particularly BI applications that reach into SharePoint and collect the data that's in SharePoint and pull that into a form on the phone that produces BI, right? Push BI is one instance that a number of groups inside Microsoft are working on. And I told you earlier there are 20 applications in process. There are probably more like 150. There are 20 we're aware of. Right? We do have some gates. We'll talk about those. Forms-based authentication is the way that programmatic access is accomplished, though. You have to enable forms-based authentication on the SharePoint site, and then you're able to use authentication methods from the phone to connect to that. There is a sample that I've built and used that connects to tasks, and actually you can make it connect to anything. You just change what it's connecting to, and it'll connect to documents, whatever. But it's kind of nice to have that tasks functionality, or I could go into any list and pull data back once I'm connected. And then the way I display it is totally up to me, of course, because I'm on the phone. There we go. So this is actually a big part of what we've been working on. We have an engineering team in MSIT that builds line of business applications, right? LOB. We define a line of business application as anything that takes corporate credentials. It makes it pretty easy for people to understand what it is, right? So if you're using data that doesn't require authentication, you don't want authentication, then you're clearly not a line of business application, right? That's not data that we're concerned about. If you build an application, we had a team recently build an application that didn't require authentication. They went through the entire process, and then they said, oh, yeah, we were going to do authentication early, but then we dropped it. And we said, well, then fine. Then move on. Send it in the marketplace. You're good to go. Because you're not pulling any data from us. It's nothing we're concerned about. We have created development standards about how people should work on the phone. We also have deployment policy gates. So before you can deploy an application to the marketplace with the Microsoft name on it, you have to go through our processes in MSIT. We have, of course, data management that we talk about here. And then I was going to follow up with an authentication demo, but I don't think I'm going to do that. It's really not that dynamic. That's part of the problem talking about IT, right? I mean, it's not product, it's not sexy, it's plumbing, right? How sexy is plumbing? We'll try and do something that's a little interesting. So our line of business applications, there are some gaps in the enterprise architecture. We're creating a best practice guide, and we're working through it. We're getting feedback from the teams that use it, providing information about how we do authentication, how you store data, how you should treat the application. We have SDL, software development, life cycle, checklists and gates that say we need to go out. We have an ACE review, a review that looks at the authentication and makes sure you're doing authentication the right way. Are you truly authenticating? Are you storing those credentials on the system? Right now, you shouldn't be. Right? It makes for a less than optimal experience because you have to ask the user for authentication frequently because you can't store them. But these practices, these mandatory practices, are being put into these standards to make sure we're compliant. Right? We had one application, I won't talk about what it was, we had one application that took your credentials but never really did anything with it. Right? Took the credentials, went up, I think it connected to a site somewhere, but then it just flipped a bit in the application, that was it, it was done. Never asked you again. It's a great experience. You put your username and password in, you got connected, and off you went. And it never connected. We're moving down the road a bit on that. We're doing what are STS, secure token servers, that allow us to send in our credentials, get back a token that has a lifetime that's associated with the machine. So you can't just pull it off. It's not easy to pull it off anyway. But you can't pull it off and put it anywhere else because it's tied to the device ID. And then a back end manages that and watches that user's account. If the password changes on the account, then they invalidate the token. So there's no user information stored on the device. It's a lot of overhead, and our identity people are not thrilled about it at all because they're concerned we've created yet another service to do authentication that we'll need to maintain going forward. So to try and work within that, what we've done was shortened up the lifetime of that token to create what is, again, less than optimal experience. So instead of having weeks and weeks of time with the token, we've pushed it down to a week, maybe a little bit longer, in the hope that once we get the encryption in the Mango builds, the encryption of strings, so we can store credentials locally that are encrypted on the device, then they'll have incentive to move forward to that and actually store the credentials locally, encrypted, and when authentication requests are made again, they'll re-authenticate real time, and they can use our existing infrastructure. We don't need to build out more servers to support software token service. And we do have the ability to set specific token lifetimes for specific applications. And we'll do that. We'll extend them a bit from the phone over what we use for other things, just to prevent the phone from having to travel back and forth too much. So considerations for the data. All data should be encrypted over the air. So when we connect, we use secure connections. We prefer not to cache any data locally. Right? If you're going to cache any data locally, it has to be encrypted. Now, prior to Mango, so current state, there is no encryption APIs, so you would have to create your own. In Mango, we'll get some calls to be able to do encryption of data, encryption of strings, stored at rest and in memory encrypted, so that will improve this story. And also the restrictions on the data that we make available, right? So until we get full device encryption, we're still going to be limited to LBI data. Right? So that's a big gate for us. You also need to think again about this access and transport. I talked a bit about that. What is correct for what purpose? Right? One of the big things to remember about all these devices is authentication equals authorization. Right? When you log on to your PC, it not only says, sure, you can use this PC, but it says, I know who you are. I know what your roles are. I know what you have access to. That's what we do. All of the security groups for, GPO, all that stuff piled on top of it. None of that in these devices. Right? You enter the PIN and you're in. You have everything. Right? So you need to remember that once you get into the device, you're able to get to everything there. So one of the gates we have is that every time you open an application for the first time, you do have to authenticate before you see any data. Right? Now, if you keep that application open, even if it tombstones and you go back to it, it still will allow you to operate. But we do push that you need to authenticate before you get visibility to that data, because we don't know who you are. You could be somebody who picked up an unlocked phone, right? You start an application. You'll also have to think about, and we're working on this, ingress versus egress, right? We think about offering line of business applications to users, VPN, direct access. We just drill into the network, we connect to the resources we need, and we disconnect, right? Well, we don't have that ability yet on the phone. Okay? So how do you get the data to the phone? Do you provide a SharePoint UAG instance that you go through? Right? Do you publish web services out on the internet that they just directly connect to? Do you use Office 365? So you have to think about how you're connecting to this, whether you're connecting into your network or you're egressing that data out to the edge and making that available. So these are things to think about as you're planning line of business applications going forward. Right? And the right factors. Do you want to use one-time passwords? We're looking at using one-time passwords. We're looking at making changes to our Wi-Fi infrastructure to clean up some of the less than optimal protocols we have on our Wi-Fi infrastructure. We want to lock it down a little more. And we'll probably create an outbound-only Wi-Fi for devices that people bring in. So the tablet you bring in and you want to connect to the internet, your phone you bring in, you want to get Exchange Active Sync, fine, connect to that and just go out. Everything protected with IPsec doesn't give you a whole lot of features in here. You're just loading up our internal network. We'd rather just send you out. Reduces risk, right? Manages our risk, and allows us to provide a service that users find useful. So context matters. Using corporate credentials, using federation with Office 365. You may have partners. You may have extranet for other authentication, and these may be different. So you need to think about what authentication methods you're using. I talked about how we do authentication code reviews. We have a team that is dedicated for all applications, not just phone applications, to do software code reviews, specifically security code reviews, and make sure we're doing the right thing. Make sure that we're not exposing credentials somewhere, that we're not leaving things laying around. And it's just part of the process. Everybody knows it's there and they just do it. Development standards. This I talked about, no application access without authentication. You authenticate to the application, now you're in, you can get to data. And we've set standards in policy. What we're working on now with engineering and the phone team is to create libraries for authentication so that our developers will use the same code. Our reviewers will be able to look at it and go, oh yeah, that's our library set, I know that's good, sign off on it, and it moves down the process. Right? So that's what we're working on right now. As the end of the month we'll get, well, this month, I don't know if it's the end of the month, but sometime this month we'll get the Mango tool set in wider availability, and we'll start putting some resources on working with those encryption pieces and getting our authentication story solid. And then people will be able to do authenticated applications much more easily. So that was the authentication demo that I'm just not going to do. Deployment, that's another issue we've had. How do we deploy applications? Well, right now, you have to put them in the marketplace and anybody can get to them. What we're going to use is what is called deep links. I wanted to demo this for you, but they won't let me because the applications that are buried in the deep links, they don't want you to see. Now, it's not a perfect solution. It's not secured, no authentications required. It really is just putting an application in the marketplace and telling the search engine, don't index this one. So you can search for a name, anything you want, you won't find it. But if you have that link, that deep link that goes directly to it, that Zune link, you can load it. We didn't do anything to fix the share button in the application. So as soon as one of your users gets it, they can share it, and they share out that URL, and someone else can get it. So it's not a perfect system. But at least it removes it from the marketplace view, so I'm not searching through the marketplace as we get thousands and thousands and thousands of applications. What we're going to do is create a web service that lists all these hidden URLs. They're not hidden, but that's the term people use a lot. You may hear it. The current term of art is deep link. We'll create a web service and then an application that runs on the phone that does authenticate to that web service. Now we can do role-based. You can look up your roles. We can give you a list of applications that are pertinent to your role, and you can select and install those applications without fishing through the marketplace. And this is probably bad wording on here. Microsoft building front-end application. Should have been Microsoft IT building front-end application for us, right? So don't expect something to come out. I wouldn't be surprised if an IT showcase white paper came out about it. So support was the other big piece of what my team does and what we do as mobile services. MSIT Worldwide Help Desk is Tier 1. That's where everybody calls first in Microsoft if they have a problem. They have support articles, what we call Primus articles, that tell them where the user needs to go if there's a problem. Right? We have just different places we need to go depending on what's going on. Right? If it's a problem with the hardware, you go to your operator, whoever sold you the phone. Right? Because they're the ones who are going to replace it. They're the ones who are going to tell you if it's not working right. Network might be the corporate operator, might be us if it's corporate Wi-Fi. How do you connect? So they have determinations of which way to go. Applications roll back to the application developer or somebody that they've provided. So the larger applications and line of business applications in Microsoft will have someone assigned to provide escalation points. The core applications are supported by IT, by our Tier 2 support, and then roll up to my group as Tier 3. And that is any of the SharePoint connectivity, Exchange, ActiveSync setup, those types of things. Here's our support process flow, fairly complex. End user can call any one of these options. We direct them in the right sense. Where do they need to go for the right call? Who provides the support? Do we escalate it? And it ends up in mail somewhere, and we resolve the issues. So it's not a simple setup. It's something you do need to think about. It's not as simple as a shrink-wrapped application that you've installed. Like there's anything simple about that. But you do need to plan on this as well. Right? So our adoption, pretty good. You can see the ramp up from 50,000 up to over 70 to the 75,000 that we've got in devices connecting. Corresponding growth in the Windows Phone 7 adoption. Right? And then look over at the support impact. The number of calls we've had. Now, granted, most of these people were on Windows 6.5, so that explains a lot. But you see that we've dropped in call volume. We did have a little spike there when the update came out. A little spike in November as we brought on phones and people worked on getting their phones configured. Lync. We have a great dependency on Lync. When I started at Microsoft, I went through new employee orientation, and they handed me my desk phone. It's a headset. I do also have a desk phone because I'm in hardware. But now employees don't get a desk phone. They get a headset. You connect to Lync wherever. I think I've probably only dialed pushing the buttons on my phone a handful of times. I dial from Lync. I answer calls from Lync. We'll get a Lync client in Mango timeframe. It's not coming out in Mango. It requires Lync update, cumulative update 4, which will come out this summer, is the expectation. That's not a guarantee. I'm not in products. I can't give you dates. The expectation is that will come out. We'll get our servers updated so we can start testing it. It will be a marketplace app, what we call a third-party app. It is not baked in like Office is or SharePoint or any of those things. Okay? Features IM, presence, and one-click calling to conferences. So it'll be very useful for me. Office support, rights management, documents, limited support. That is, you can't create rights managed documents on your phone. You can't change the rights management even if you have permissions to on the phone. It makes it essentially read-only. You can't save it, you can't copy it, you can't forward it. Right? Pretty much whatever the things have said. But it does allow you to securely send a document to the phone. Requires rights management server. Currently, Office 365 does not support rights management. We're working on that. I'm sure it'll come out. It'll be one of the updates that we'll get there. So I did want to just do at least one little demo, and then we'll do our phone giveaway, and then we'll do any questions we have. Let me switch over to this. I want to just show you the rights managed mail. I thought it was pretty slick. So let me enter my super secret PIN again. So I've reset this phone because you only get the experience the first time. So did I lose my, I didn't pin Office. Right, so Office has SharePoint. I have phone. There's Office 365. As I said, when you connect to Office 365, it'll just connect it. SharePoint and SkyDrive. And it's connected up to my SkyDrive based on my live account. So I want to connect to this SharePoint site. I'm going to pick it up just because my typing's a little better when I pick it up. I hope. There we go. And I had somebody tell me, HTTPS is supported on here. And I said, well, you know, actually, I've been using HTTPS on my SharePoint for quite a while. I have a SharePoint server at home, which tells you that I am actually in IT. So Microsoft SharePoint. This is actually out on Office 365. Oh, and of course, because it's a demo, I can't type. And I created demo sites for the phone for our employees to use. We wipe the data on a regular basis and recreate it. Just allows us to do things. And so I stole that for today because I own the site. I'm able to do that. So I put in my SharePoint site. And it's connecting, and it can't connect. I probably mistyped something. And actually, I am running a little late, so I'm sorry about that. I'll do the demo. I'll be happy to show it to anybody if you want to stick around for just a couple minutes. But so, just to summarize, we talked about our policies, what we do around ILCL, some of the reasons behind it, consumerization, some of the issues there, other mobile issues we've seen. And really, the big story, number of phones are up, support incidents are down. That's the really good story for us in IT. Our costs are down. So what's your call to action? Sorry. Verify your ActiveSync configuration. Make sure AutoConfig works, right? You want people to be able to put in their email address and connect. Configure a rights management server. Get IRM up and running. Right? This is a useful thing to have regardless of the phone. It's not widely used, but I've found it very useful all the time. As I said, it's a great, even just the IRM on the mail is a great reminder, don't forward this. This is confidential, right? And then people know just not to talk about it, too. Right? Upgrade the link. Make sure you get link up. Support the cumulative update this summer, and then these applications will be rolling out for Link, not just on Windows Phone. There will be applications on other mobile devices for Link, so it'll become important. Discover your application basics. What are you going to do for line of business? How are you going to do it? Right? You're going to build native applications. You're going to do HTML. Deal with how are we connecting to it. We're going to tunnel into the network. We're going to provide the access on the outside. And build some development guidelines so people know what they're doing. The worst thing you can do is have your developers go out and build something and then make them do it all over again because you didn't tell them what they needed to do. So here's some related content still to come. Windows Phone, what's next? Mobile message queue. Rob Tiffany, he's a great speaker. Phone development, Silverlight, Exchange, phone application platform engineering team. Those are sessions that have occurred. Right, and there's today's sessions. We've got a list of all of these. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Let's get to our contest here. Thursday, deploying Windows Phone in the enterprise. Another session may be interesting to you. Performance. One thing today, if you're interested in line of business development, you have an opportunity to discuss with the phone platform engineering team, the people who are actually making plans for post-Mango. You're going to talk to them about what's going on. Building B, main level, authority boardroom. Okay? If you don't recall this and you want to remember where it is, there's write-ups of it at the phone booth in the TLC. And this is the people we're working with to try and define what we're going to do. Mango +1. Right? All right, so if you have questions, you want to see demos, look at the latest phones, we're in the expo. I'll be there this afternoon. If you have questions we don't get to now, I'll also be there tomorrow afternoon. Okay. Well, the hat contest, if you don't have a hat, they're all gone. But if you do have a hat, make sure you wear it. They're still walking around picking 5 people a day to give a phone to. Session contest. Any other questions? Additional resources. These are on all the slides. Complete the evaluation, please. And you can scan this tag. I'll put it back up here in a second. I think that's it. That is it. Okay, we'll leave that one up.